VeloVoices. Many voices, one passion. Pro cycling for fans by fans.
Hello and welcome to our fourth edition of our VeloVoices podcast on March 10th. This is Chris in Virginia, and of course I'm joined by Kathy and Tim in London. How are you guys doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Tim, how you doing?
Yeah, pretty good, thanks.
You're hanging in there?
Just about.
Yeah, there's been a lot of racing to watch, so I can understand why you pause a little bit. So tonight we're going to talk about so many races. We're going to talk about Langkawi, we're going to talk about Strade Bianche, we're going to talk about Roma Maxima, and we're going to talk about Paris-Nice, and then of course we're going to talk about the race that's going on even as we speak in Tirreno-Adriatico. And then after we review those races and tell you what we thought about those, we're going to have a little special section where we pick our Fantasy Classics team. And this is going to be 8 riders that we think can win Milan-San Remo, the Tour of Flanders, and Paris-Roubaix. And Kathy, there are not 8 Fabian Cancellara's. There's only one. So he can only actually be one member of this illustrious group.
Well, I'm just not going to be in this podcast then. That's all there is to it.
All right, and then after we do that, we will end with our sprint finish. So, Tim, the first race that kind of ended at the very, almost, 2 weeks ago now was the Tour of Langkawi. You want to tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, the Tour of Langkawi, it's probably the best known of all the Asian stage races, and I rather like it, despite the fact that it's quite sprint heavy in nature. And the coverage we get from the Malaysian host broadcaster is pretty limited, so it meant we only got to see about 10 minutes of racing per day.
Right.
But it's a bit of a schizophrenic event, actually. It comprises 8 flat stages, which maybe is a couple too many, but it also has 2 very long, hard summit finishes, both topping out in excess of 1,500 metres altitude. So the riders have to negotiate that in 30-degree plus heat and sweat-drenching humidity. So it's a really tough challenge for this early in the season.
Yeah, and who was looking good there? I mean, tell me about which teams kind of shined.
Yeah, I guess Blanco were probably the team, really, yet again, to show great early season form. So Teo Boss bossed the first 2 sprint stages before he retired ill mid-race. And then his teammate Tom Laser took his first pro win with a late breakaway mid-race. But beyond that, clearly with 8 sprints, it's a race that's dominated by the quick men. So Andrea Guardini, who's now with Astana, he'd won 11 stages over the previous 2 years, but he won just the one time this year. And then there were 4 sprint stages that were shared between Europcar's Brian Coquard, who is having a fantastic start to the season, and then Vini Fantini's Francesco Chicchi.
Yeah, so you throw those guys in with what we're seeing over in Tirreno-Adriatico. There's so many good sprinters this year. It's going to be really interesting to see how all this stuff settles out and things like the Grand Tours. Now, I also hear that the Chinese are kind of up and coming in this Tour of Langkawi. They're, some climbing prowess. What's your take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. The GC battle effectively came down to the 2 big summit finishes, and on the first one, which was stage 3 up to Cameron Highlands, Chinese rider Mei Yin Wang, he took that stage with a solo attack, and I think he surprised the peloton a little bit, who thought he might fold on the way up, but he stayed strong all the way to the end. Carried actually quite a big advantage, almost 3 minutes into the second big stage. So I think that's it's a sign that Chinese cycling is gathering in strength, both in terms of the number of riders and teams and in terms of the quality. But unfortunately, he couldn't hold on. So on stage 5, which was the Queen stage, up to Genting Highlands, Nippo de Rosa's Colombian climber Julian Arredondo, he took that stage. He raced. He just rode away from everyone on the final climb. Took the yellow jersey, and he really had no problem at all defending it to the finish. So that's the 5th year in a row that a South American climber has won the overall in Langkawi.
In a race that's dominated by sprints and then has basically 2 summit finishes. So, interesting. All right, well, let's move on from Langkawi and let's talk about Strade Bianche. That both Kathy and I tuned into last week live, and we live tweeted that, and it was a fantastic preview of what I think we're going to see in the classics. So, Kathy, tell us what happened at Strade Bianche.
Well, it was a very beautiful day. So there was no mud, unfortunately. I was kind of looking forward to that. But it was very windy, which, was kicked up the dirt and also sort of made the peloton a bit, I think that it made it a little bit more cautious than usual. But there was a break of 4 that went away very, very early on, and they were left out there for most of the race, actually, including Katusha's Belkov and BMC's Char, and we'll come back to them in a second. So about 50 kilometers to go, Juan Antonio Flecha decided to try to bridge the gap between the peloton and the break, and he didn't time it quite right, because he was kind of left dangling out there for the longest time, because it was only about 17 kilometers to go that Cannondale's Marino Moser decided to leave Peter Sagan and go off in search of Flecha. And he found him and then pretty much rode right past him. And so then there were a few breakaway people, and Moser actually caught up with Char and Belkov about 6 kilometers to go. Now, during all this time in the peloton, we had Cadel Evans, we had Cancellara, we had Sagan, everybody kind of watching everybody else. Basically, Sagan and Cancellara marked themselves out, basically. Sagan was just staying on Cancellara's wheel. Cancellara was trying to lead an attack at about 6 kilometers on, and he was getting absolutely nowhere. So that doesn't bode well for the classics. But anyway, so Moser, Char, and Belkov are coming into Siena, and then Moser just attacks on the uphill, and he takes it about 5 seconds ahead of Peter Sagan, who we didn't see it, but he must have absolutely stormed through. And third on the podium was AG2R's Nocentini. Is that how you pronounce it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nocentini, yeah.
Yeah. So it was absolutely beautiful race, actually, even though Cancellara didn't win.
A couple of things that really impressed me. First of all, Juan Antonio Flecha, I love when he kind of goes off on these breakaways and tries these stunts. And occasionally they work. But what really amazed me about him was that once Moser caught up to him and passed him, he had the wherewithal to get back on Moser's wheel and basically ended up going up to the breakaway with Moser, was with that basically elite group of 6 guys, but he'd spent so much energy in the wind by himself that there was no way he was going to follow the final 3 selection, and then Moser going up to the finish. And then the other thing that amazed me about your boy Fabian Cancellara was that, again, with 6 kilometers to go, he realizes he's been marked out of the race, but he's not going to give up, and so he just drills it, and he almost catches the entire group before Moser attacks, single-handedly. So what, Tim, what's your take on how can Fabian win again? Because it seems like the peloton has figured out, all right, if we have 2 strong riders, what we're going to do is we're going to sit our favorite on Fabian's wheel, and we're going to launch our other guy, who we know is very capable of winning this race, into the stratosphere, and if Fabian doesn't chase him down, we win, and if he does chase him down, our guy on the wheel is going to overtake him in the end. So what does he got to do?
Yeah, I think there's been talk over the last week or so that Fabian needs a plan B, and I'm not really sure that's the case, because he is absolutely brilliant at what he does. He knows he's never going to win a large group sprint. And really, the onus is not so much on Cancellara for me. It's on Radio Shack. They need to be able to work more strongly as a team so that he doesn't get isolated. They need to have the same kind of option that Cannondale had in sending Moser up the road. and they need to take the pressure off him because, fantastic though he is, and he showed that in the last 6 kilometres, he cannot do it all himself when you have a team as strong as Cannondale with 2 potential winners such as Sagan and Moser, who can do to you what they did to you in that race.
Yeah, and you know what? Radio Shack did it right last year because they did have a rider on their team who was capable of that in Daniela Benatti, who they actually did send up the road in the race, which made everybody else chase and not worry so much about Cancellara. And then as soon as he got his opportunity, bam, he went and he was gone and nobody could chase him down. But he doesn't have anybody like that anymore. There's really nobody that's capable of doing that on Radio Shack. So, is Radio Shack really the place for Cancellara unless he can get some kind of support? All right, well, what do we think about Mosier? I mean, this guy comes from some pretty heavy cycling pedigree. Any thoughts on him?
Well, I think that between him and Sagan, I think that they make a really good team. And I think, either of them, if they're working in a team like they did with Strada, we could see either one of them winning quite a lot this year because together they just seem really smart and really strong. And, nobody seems to be able to keep Sagan off the podium, I've got to say.
Right. I mean, that finale, they didn't show it on the camera, but when he came in,
my God! He just comes.
There was a huge gap between him and the rest of the field. Yeah. And it was almost like he could see Mosier crossing the line, and his arms were up, and it was awesome.
God. I really wish we could have seen him just surge away from everybody because nobody was really expecting him to be the second one that came up, and then he just my God, he was like a missile.
Right, and we're going to talk about Tirreno-Adriatico in a little bit and how he's done against Cav already this season. But we'll get there, and I know Tim's going to want to talk about that. So, okay, now the next day in Italy, I think it was the next day, we have the Roma Maxima, which is a very different race than Strade Bianche, obviously, because of there's not the dirt roads that you have. Tim, you had a glance at that. Tell us a little bit about what happened at that race.
Yeah, I thought this was actually rather good with a little bit of fun silliness at the end. Roma Maxima is what used to be called the Giro del Lazio, which was last run in 2008, I think. And if Strade Bianche is all about the gorgeous Tuscan countryside and the white dirt roads, then Roma Maxima is all about the city of Rome itself and its history, taking place as it does against the backdrop of the Colosseum. And really, it gives RCS Sport a fantastic little double-header to whet the appetite ahead of Milan-San Remo. And like I said, it was a good race too. So AG2R's Blair Gadri, he won only the second race of his pro career in what turned out to be quite a tense finish when he finished solo out of a 5-man break in a real will he won't he stay away scenario.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing was, which I didn't realise until afterwards, was that he wasn't even originally down to race in Rome. He came in as a last-minute replacement after Steve Chanel fell ill. So it was a real bonus for him.
Yeah, he said that the race wasn't on his schedule until Friday before. So, basically, it's like last minute. I think he actually raced Strade Bianche and then came and did this race. So, that's pretty incredible. So, and then tell us about the funny thing that happened at the end, because that was the thing that captured all the headlines. Poor Kadri, he's got the second victory of his career. It's an awesome thing, but he's overshadowed by what?
Yeah, absolutely. So Kadri crosses the line, gets to celebrate. 37 seconds later, there's the chasing group that comes in. Filippo Pozzato wins the sprint for second place, only to raise his arms in triumph. So what had happened at the end of what had been a fairly chaotic case, and without the benefit of race radios as well, he actually thought he'd won. And I think the only word really to sum that up is oops.
Yeah, I guess one of his teammates, I think it was the Little Prince, actually said, "Oh no, you're good. It was only those 4 guys up the road, so go sprint for the win." Anyway, I found this quote from him after the race. He says, "I put my arms up because I thought I'd won. When I saw that my soigneur was hiding instead of celebrating, I knew there was something wrong." Oh, poor Pipo. Anyway, I think he's so far had a pretty good start to the season, so it's going to be interesting to see his form in the classics and what he'll do maybe at Milan-San Remo. All right. So going from there now, we get into more of racing in France with the start of Paris-Nice, and that ended today. And Kathy, why don't you let us know what happened there?
Well, in Paris-Nice, actually, the prologue was won by Europcar's Damien Godin, who I don't think anybody put any money on to do that. But he actually stormed it, and it was great, because Sylvain Chavanel came in second by about a second and took the green jersey. And it suddenly became a very French race all of a sudden, because in stage one, Nasser Bohani, is that how you pronounce it? I'm going to say that all the time, wins in a sprint over Pataki and Cannondale's Viviani. And he takes the yellow with Godin and Chavanel in second and third. So was quite a good race for the French, I've got to say.
And that kit, that Buhani's kit that looks like the French flag with almost no sponsor logos on it. A lot of people are like, I don't know if I like that. I love it.
Oh,
I think it's awesome.
All
right, so then what happened?
So in stage two, the Germans came back because Marcel Kittel won the sprint, but that was because Bohani crashed out, actually. He had a bad crash, and he had hand and face injuries, so he had to actually come out of the race altogether.
I just read that he actually broke some of his teeth, actually, in the crash. No. So he's going to be out of Milan-San Remo because of those injuries, which is pretty sad for him.
That's a real shame.
It is always a shame when the yellow jersey goes down in a crash like that.
Absolutely. So. I mean, it was been bad weather for the very beginning of the race anyway. And then, so with Bohani out, Viviani takes the yellow. And then in stage three, we have good old Andrei Talansky from Garmin, who went out in the break on the last climb. And he basically let Sky do a lot of the work and then attacked at the about a kilometer out. And he basically took the yellow and the stage.
Yeah.
So what I quite liked about this was you had 4 yellow jerseys that were completely different. So far, nobody had started to control the race. However, that's about to change. Stage 4 was taken on the line by Michael Albacini from Green Edge and Ham, and Talansky keeps the yellow. Then stage 5, this is a great stage because Jens Voigt goes out on about the 14th kilometer, and he stays out until 7 kilometers to the finish.
He gets in this breakaway and then he attacks the break.
Exactly. So he was kind of out alone. He was out with people. He was out alone again, and then they just reel him in. And this is where Richie Porte actually picks up the yellow jersey, because Talansky attacks 3 times on the final climb, and Richie Porte and his Sky Riders, they just bided their time, and so they did the Team Sky controlling the race, not getting panicky in any way, shape, or form. And then once Talansky's pretty much, spent himself.
He lit all the matches that he could.
Port just puts the pedal down, and he takes 32 seconds on him and wins the stage. So then stage 6 was a Sky control stage, so that there wasn't any threat to the yellow jersey whatsoever. But it was one of my favorite stages because there was a surprise ending, because BMC had been working pretty much, the second half of the race, keeping Philippe Gilbert in the sort of contention because they wanted him to win that sprint. And so he was driving towards the line, and it was AG2R's Dumoulin, and they thought, okay, it's one of the two of us, and Phil Gilles was pretty sure he'd got it, and then all of a sudden up runs Sylvain Chavanel and takes the win. And the look on Filgel's face when he turns to look to see, Chavanel with his arms in the air, is absolutely priceless. However, Port keeps the yellow. And, of course, today was the time trial up called Col d'Ez. And there, everybody pretty much figured Port would have to do something really stupid like fall over and
right.
and stay down to really lose this, because I think the nearest guy was 32 seconds or 42 seconds behind him. So everybody figured that it was a fait accompli, but nobody thought he was going to win by the margin that he did. So he just absolutely stormed it. I think he won by 22 seconds or something over second
that was
place.
Incredible.
So that's Paris.
Well, a couple of things stood out to me. You mentioned Talansky and the attack 3 times. And Tim, I'd love to see you write a Talking Tactics on this, because at first I was really critical of Talansky after that stage. I was like, why did he attack 3 separate times? Why didn't he just sit wheels? He's in the race lead. Just wait till the very end and then attack and see if you can gain time. But he didn't. He lit all his matches, and then Port just rode away from him. And then I was thinking, you know what? I think he figured out that Port was going to be dominant over him in this time trial, and that's what happened. He really needed to get a lot of time on Port, and he couldn't do it. So I don't know, if he made the right decision when he was attacking or not. I think he was just trying to get time, and Port was having none of that. And then once Port got the race lead, he was like a pit. I know we call Talansky pit bull, but Port was the pit bull. He would not allow anybody to get near him after that. So, any thoughts on that, Tim?
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you, Chris. I think Talansky must have figured that Port would have the beating of him in the time trial, and therefore he had to go on the attack. I think that's the only real sensible reason for him to have done what he did, and it was fantastic to watch, even though ultimately it was futile. And I know that Sky have come in for a little bit of criticism for the way they controlled that stage, but it wasn't the most exciting way for Port to grab the yellow jersey. But at the same time, they had 3-4 men riding the train, and if you've got numerical advantage over your rivals, that's what you do. You just grind them down until finally they've got nothing left to give, and that's when Port went. And tactically, they rode a perfect race that day.
Yeah, and the scary thing is that, they're we're going to talk about Tirreno in just a second, but they're kind of playing the same cards there, and I think teams are left to wonder, and fans are left to wonder, how is Sky doing this? What's their secret? And of course you've got the naysayers who, speculate doping, and then you've got another group that say, no, this is just the right group of guys in the right circumstances that have worked really hard. And I don't want to get into all that, but man, if you're another team and you're thinking about trying to win a stage race and you're looking at the talent across these 2 races, it's pretty daunting to think about what it's gonna be like in July. So with that, Tim,
why
don't we?
You're just depressing the hell out of me.
Well, I know it really is amazing what Port was able to do in Paris-Nice, and the way that Sky was able to do that, and it's really amazing what they're doing in Tirreno. It's to watch domestiques basically, ride riders like Contador and J-Rod into the ground. Yeah, that's pretty. And I know those guys haven't reached their top form yet. So July could be a little bit different, and it could be that these guys are still just training to get into form, and these Sky guys are peaking too early. I don't know, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens.
Contador said today, I think, that this is the first time that he's really had to deal with the Sky train like they have been, so dominant because of, obviously he wasn't in the Tour last year. But, and he's sort of said, okay, now I know what kind of adjustments I have to make. So, it's kind of, they keep doing it, and somebody will figure out how to work around it. And if anybody can, God, Contador can, so.
Yeah, he's been known to be able to snap the elastic in the past. So, Tim, what, with Paris-Nice going on and Tirreno at the same time, it seems to me like a lot of the heavy hitters in both the sprinters and the GC guys chose Tirreno over Paris-Nice. Is kind of Paris-Nice becoming, the second Second race, that used to be the race that everybody went to, and a couple of guys went to Tirreno. What's going on here that's causing this shift, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's anything in particular. I guess these things often go in cycles, and if we look at last year, the split of talent between Paris-Nice and Tirreno-Adriatico was probably was fairly even.
Yeah.
I do think that this year Tirreno has a more challenging and varied parkour than Paris-Nice did, which perhaps tipped the balance in its favour with a lot of the big GC riders. Mm-hmm. But it's been a fantastic race so far, hasn't it?
Yeah. So why don't you just go right into it then? What's happening in Tirreno?
Well, we're 5 days down, 2 to go, and over the course of this weekend, we've had the 2 key climbing stages. It's been pretty wet so far, all in all, but Omega Pharma Quickstep got us underway, almost as you would expect as the reigning world champions in the team time trial. They blitzed the field on stage 1 to put Mark Cavendish into the Maglia Azzurra, the leader's jersey. Now, Cav would probably have been expecting to add to his win total on one or both of the following 2 days, but to be honest, his sprint train never really were at the races, and he made a couple of mistakes himself. So Matt Goss ended up winning the marathon 232km stage to Indicatore in what can only really be described as torrential conditions.
Right.
And there's been a lot of discussion about the way Cav chewed out his team publicly afterwards, and I know we'll come to that later. Mm-hmm. But the following day he was edged out by Peter Sagan. After which, to be fair to him, he held his hands up and admitted that one was down to him. So you take the rough with the smooth, I guess.
Well, that one was interesting because Cav, I think he had a better lead out there. It wasn't perfect, but Greipel had a great lead out, and then Sagan is still right there on the wheel and accelerates by them at the very end. So this green jersey competition in July is going to be fascinating to watch if these guys are doing the same things that they're doing now. Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of form, I think Sagan appears to have a faster sprint than he did last year. I guess that will tie in with his preparations for Milan-San Remo. Cav, there's a couple of areas for improvement, but he was there or thereabouts on both days. If the one I'd be most concerned about actually is Greipel. I think on both stages Lotto Belisol had pretty good lead-outs, and he wasn't really anywhere on either day. So not quite sure what's happening there, but it'll be interesting to see whether he's having a little bit of a dip in form while looking to peak for a little bit later in the season, or whether there is actually an issue there, because Greipel normally at the start of the season is phenomenal, as he was in the first 2 months of the season.
Yeah, and you know what? It'll be interesting to see if Gossi is really back, because if he is, then you've got a fourth guy in the mix, and then we already talked about some of these sprinters like Kiki and the Argonauts have a train with Kittel, so there's so many guys to talk about, and that's become such a competitive field of guys. All right, so then we had a couple of, after the rain, Tim, we've had a couple of summit finishes, right, at Tirreno.
Yeah, that's right. So actually, the 2 stages this weekend are almost exactly the reverse of what we had last year. So we had the Queen stage first on Saturday. So that was taking us up to the ski station at Prati di Tivo. Lots of snow still lining the roads near the top at this time of year, and almost a carbon copy of what we saw at Paris-Nice. Sky set a pretty punishing pace on the climb, with first Dario Cataldo and then Sergio Henao and Rigoberto Urán. We saw Contador put in a couple of big attacks, and it looked for a while like Chris Froome was cooked.
Right.
But a little bit like he did in Oman, Froome surged forward in the final kilometre, and he took the stage win. That was interesting to see. Froome clearly has trouble reacting immediately to the accelerations that someone like Contador or Rodriguez can put in, but he hangs in there. He's a little bit like Cadel Evans in that respect, but when it comes to it in the final kilometre, he's got a hell of a kick.
Yeah, and when he sees smells the finish line, then it's go time for him. And that Prati di Tivo stage, I mean, he didn't only win that stage, he won it handily. I mean, those guys, he gained major seconds on all of his rivals there. And then even today, where J-Rod attacks at the finishing of today's stage, Froome wasn't that far behind him. It looked like it was a lot farther at first, but he made up some ground there. So, yeah, it's interesting to see. And I wonder, if Froome's the Tour de France guy. Is he going to be able to carry the form that he has now into July like Wiggins did last year? I mean, I thought that was a pretty tall order to ask of Wiggins, and it looks like Froome might be on that same trajectory.
Yeah, no, that's right. It'll be fascinating to see, because I think Froome is following the same race program that Wiggins did last year, so we'll get a pretty clear comparison as we go forward through May and June. But as you said, to today's stage, which is just a short, punchy finish in Chieti, which is only 1.2 kilometres, but it was over 10% average gradient. Right. Absolutely tailor-made for Rodriguez, and he got to the bottom of the climb, off he went, and pretty much that was all. That was the last we saw of him. So Contador did manage to sneak a few seconds out of Froome with time bonuses, but Froome's got a 20-second lead with just 2 stages left. Tomorrow's a rolling stage, so one to be watchful for, but one that he ought to be able to control. And then there's just a short time trial to finish. So in terms of the GC, you'd have to say it's odds on Froome for the win. Yeah,
Contador said today that he's not given up, and so it'd be interesting if he'll try out like a crazy Vuelta move. But I think that if Sky does their job, they should be winning both Tirreno-Adriatico and Paris-Nice, which that's pretty remarkable. All right, so we have just a couple of other things to talk about. Tim, you wanted to mention Michael Beauregard, because I know some information came out about him this week, and we also wanted to highlight a little bit on Marianne Vos. You want to talk about those two?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's start with Beauregard. I think it wouldn't be our fortnightly podcast if we didn't have at least one doping story to talk about. and true to form, they roll on and on and on. So I guess if the truth about Lance Armstrong was an open secret for quite a while, then we can probably say the same of this former Rabobank rider. And he finally opened up last week, and he admitted to using EPO, blood transfusions, and cortisone during the last 10 years of his riding career. During which time he took, he was successful. He took a couple of stages at the Tour. He won Amstel Gold. He won Paris-Nice, and he had a host of podium places in various classics. But the interesting thing I thought was there were 2 or 3 things that he said that really started to raise some eyebrows. So I think for one thing was his now frequently re-quoted statement that he always rode the Tour de France clean, and that he only doped in training and for other races, which for me is about as credible as a British MP's expenses claims.
Yeah, it's like these guys have lost all sense of what riding clean actually means. Riding clean means that you just don't dope at all in training and racing. You just ride clean. That's an incredible statement. What was the other one, Tim? You said there was more than one.
Yeah, well, I think he then went on to defend Dr. Geert Leenders, which in the current environment is, let's say, brave.
Right.
And then interestingly, he also implicated former Giro and double Vuelta champion Denis Menchov.
Yes.
Said he blood doped alongside him, and you know what? I really wouldn't like to be in Denis's shoes right now, because you can. I would imagine he can kind of feel the walls closing in a little bit.
Yeah, and then Michael Rasmussen again gets on Dutch television and also calls out Lenders and also calls out Menchov. So now you got multiple people, and I think we all knew it anyway. But it'd be interesting to see what happens over at Katusha. And of course, we saw Menchov in one of these races this week. I can't remember which one he's in. Attacking and doing his thing. So I hope that things get settled with him and that he has to pay the price for what he's done. All right. Well, let's move on to more positive news then and talk about Marianne Vos.
Yeah, definitely a real positive note here.
Yeah.
So the 25-year-old Dutch woman, she is just continuing on this inexorable path to global domination. So we mentioned last month that she won her 5th straight cyclocross world title, and then since then she's entered and won her first ever mountain bike race, and that was against a quality field, and then she's returned to the road for her first road races of the season. And I don't think it really comes as any great surprise that she's won both events that she's entered so far. So she won Drentse 8 in a bunch sprint, and then she won Ronde van Drenthe, which is the first race of the Women's World Cup, in a 2-up finish, she beat Ellen van Dijk. So, Vos de Vos is simply unstoppable at the moment, and she is a fantastic advert for women's racing.
Yeah, she's incredible, and she's still using the artwork I did for her Twitter avatar. So hey, I think that's what's really actually made her successful. It's not all the training, it's the artwork. All right. Okay, we are going to now talk about our Fantasy Classics team. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually talk about Milan-San Remo, Flanders, and Roubaix. And we're going to each pick 2 people that we think could win that race. And then we're going to we'll settle on who the 2 are. The person, Tim's going to be talking about Milan-San Remo, and so he'll give us his suggestions first, and then I'll throw in mine, and Kathy will throw in hers, or whatever. And then, Tim, you ultimately get to decide who you think the 2 people are from Milan-San Remo. And then I will talk about Flanders, and then Kitty will talk about Roubaix. And then, of course, we're going to talk about a couple of the domestiques that we think could help bring this team together. So at the end of this, we're going to have 8 riders. And hopefully we won't fight too much. And hopefully Tim won't have to step between Kathy and I, which he normally has to do. All right. So, Tim, I'm going to, let's talk about Milan-San Remo first. Why don't you describe to us what kind of race it is and what kind of rider you think it takes to win it, and then give us your the people that you think can win it and why they could win it.
Yeah, sure. So Milan-San Remo, it's not called the Sprinters Classic for nothing, and it's certainly the of all the races in the Spring Classic season, it's the one that the sprinters really stand a genuine chance of winning. Although, having said that, it has changed quite a lot in recent years with the introductions of more hills. Mm-hmm. So in particular, the introduction of Le Mani, which was 2007 or 2008, I think, has caused real problems for the likes of Mark Cavendish last year, where he got dropped on the climb and was never able to recover. So to win this race, really, you need someone who can win either a bunch sprint or more likely a small group sprint, but you need to be strong enough to get over the hills first. So my 2 nominees for our team would be, no great surprise with the first one, Peter Sagan. And if anything, he is looking even better so far this year than he did last year. I mean, last year he was 4th at San Remo, and do you know what? He would probably have won if he had any cooperation from the rest of his chase group. He's already said this race is his primary target for the early part of the season. But it's not just Milan-San Remo. I mean, he can be a genuine threat throughout the Spring Classic season. Last year he was 5th at Flanders, so he'd be useful for the other races that we're talking about. He was 2nd at Ghent-Wevelgem, and he was 3rd at Amstel Gold. I mean, it's really hard to identify a weakness, and he is going to be, I think, one of the dominant classic riders for the next 10 years. So he's my first nomination.
All right.
And then secondly, there were a lot of potential names that I considered here, and I know that everyone who knows me is going to think I'm going to say Cav, but I'm not. I'm going to nominate Simon Gerrans. He's the defending champion. He's much more of an all-round sprinter than Cav. He can be a contender in some of the hillier, tougher races as well. So last year he won the GP Quebec. He was 2nd at San Sebastian. He's also had good finishes at Amstel Gold and at Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So he can get up and down those hills. And even if he isn't a contender for something like Flanders or for Paris-Roubaix, he can be a strong contributor for the team. And that really is the real reason that I'm not picking Cav. I think there is, as we've discussed on earlier podcasts, there is an element that his rivals have sussed him out. They know if they attack en masse on the Mani, he will struggle to keep up. And then I think, given that we're picking a team for Flanders and for Paris-Roubaix as well, he would be much less of an all-round help in those races than, say, Gerrans would. So that's my 2 riders for Milan-San Remo, Peter Sagan and Simon Gerrans.
Okay, well, Kathy, do you agree, or did you want to pick different riders from those?
Well, I agree with Peter Sagan, because I just think he's going to win for all the reasons that Tim said. I am not going to pick Simon Gerrans, and that's not because I'm bitter about last year, but I'm actually going to pick Vincenzo Nibali, because I think that he wants it so badly, and I think he could actually spring a surprise, because everybody's going to be looking at Sagan or some of the sprinters or something. And he did come in third last year, so he could spring a surprise.
Well, one of the things about Nibali is he's a descending demon, and he can come off of the Poggio and Sorpresa at great speeds, and he can climb the next one to get over it and get down. So that's a pretty interesting choice. Okay, the reason I agree with Sagan as well. This is his number one race. He's got the bike handling skills to get down these hills in a hurry, and obviously he's got the finishing sprint. However, Tim, Simon Gerrans did not go to Paris-Nice because he's sick. And he said that his form might not be good enough to defend Milan-San Remo this year, although he is still going to give it a shot. So I cannot pick Gerrans to win either. I could pick two other people, though, and Kitty, I don't mind your choice of Nibali,
well,
but
you.
I think in the end he's not going to be by himself, and he's going to be with people who can out-sprint him. And I think that these two people could be that person. I'm going to say Matt Goss, who has actually won this race in the past and is showing form at Tirreno-Adriatico that he can sprint with the best and get over some of these hills. And then I'm going to actually say our black sheep of Heinrich Hausler at IAM. He said he had a great week at Paris-Nice, and that this next 5 races are the most important. But if I had to pick one of those, I would say that Matt Goss and Peter Sagan are the two riders that I would pick. So what do you think, Tim?
Well, I guess we're all agreed on Sagan, so that's a nice easy one. I'm really, my heart wants to say Nibali, but I fear that what will happen to him will be exactly what happened to him last year, where on the final climb and then on the descent, he desperately tried to shake Gerrans and the other members of that breakaway group, and he just was not able to do so. So I think he will probably try the same again. But I think my heart says Nibali, but my head says Matt Goss. So I think we'll go with Sagan and Goss as our two. Was there anyone else that you guys wanted to throw in as potentially a dark horse?
Well, the only other person that I could think of that we haven't seen much of lately is Bosenhagen. And I wasn't sure where his head is at right now, but he's one of these guys who could also sprint at the end if he can get over these big hills with that front group. So, but I still like Gossi over him.
Yeah, and I'd probably give a shout out to John Degenkolb, who was 5th last year, and perhaps more relevantly, he was 4th in the world's road race in Limburg. So he's proven that he can get up and down the climbs, which it's surprising because he's a fairly big guy. But the question mark, I think, has to be on, as far as he's concerned, that his form this year hasn't yet been convincing in the same way it was at the end of last year, where he swept all before him at the Vuelta and then did so well at the Worlds. But I think we've got the beginnings of a strong team there. So I guess, Chris, do you want to take the lead on Flanders?
You bet. Okay, so let's talk about what kind of race Flanders is. Flanders is the best classic. I know people will say Paris-Roubaix is, but Paris-Roubaix is too flat for me. So Flanders is 256 kilometers. This is the 97th edition of it. And the race basically starts in Bruges, and 17 climbs later, it ends. And this year, they're going to be following the same concept that was presented in 2012, where they go over the Quermont and the Paterberg 3 times each at the end before they finish in Oudenaarde. So we know what the course looks like because we saw it raced last year. And of course, last year, Tom Bonin had his double Flanders win and then Paris-Roubaix. However, this year, Tom Bonin has hurt his arm, obviously, and he's had a bit of a slower build up to this race. And so I have actually not picked Tom Bonin to win Flanders, and I know that might shock you. I have actually picked his teammate, Sylvain Chavanel, to win Flanders. 2 years ago, he got on Cancellara's wheel and basically rode to the finish line with Cancellara and was clipped by Noyens at the end. But I think Chavanel is the kind of guy who everybody will be watching Boonen And then he's going to basically do the Mosier and Sagan thing where he rides away from everybody. They try to chase him down, and he wins. So that's my first pick. And then my second pick, and this is also someone who's not necessarily noted for... he's more noted for winning Ardennes Classics, but I actually think Philippe Gilbert has targeted this race. He wants to win Flanders as the world champion. And as we see his form in Tirreno, I think it's starting to pick up, and I think he's gonna peak at the right time. He's not the guy who will win Flanders because he can't ride away from people on the flats, but on these punchy hills, I think that Gilbert has an advantage. So my two are Sylvain Chavanel and Philippe Gilbert. Tim, what do you think?
Now, interestingly enough, I've gone for a pair of BMC riders as well, but neither of them are Philippe Gilbert. So I guess one I've gone for with my head, and the other with my heart. So starting with the rational choice, I've gone for Greg van Avermaet. He's a guy who's always there or thereabouts in the big one-day races. He has a useful habit of getting into the right move at the right time. And his Palmares is crammed full of near misses. Yes, he's won Paris Tour, but that's a much flatter race. But already this year he's been fifth at Omloop Het Nieuwsblad. He was sixth at Strade Bianche last weekend, so he's carrying some pretty good form. And he can even be useful in some of the other classics as well. I know he's certainly finished seventh at San Remo in the past, and I think he was seventh or eighth in Liège-Bastogne-Liège a few years back too. So he could be an interesting one. And if there's an opportunity to be sniffed out, odds are he'll be in the right break at the right time. So that's the choice with my head, and the choice with my heart is Thor Hushovd. Now it may just be that we have seen the best of Thor, but I think he's super motivated after a pretty miserable 2012. He's already got that all-important first win of the year. He took a stage at the Tour de Haute-Var. We know he can win from a sprint in the right circumstances. He can win from a break. He's versatile enough to have won Gent-Wevelgem. He's finished second in Roubaix, so he has history there. He's been third in San Remo. And of all BMC's potential contenders, he might just be the one who is allowed to sneak away in a late break and then win. So that's my two, Van Avermaet and Hushovd.
All right, and Kathy, what about you?
Well, I'm actually going to agree with you, Chris, on one of your choices, and that's Sylvain Chavanel. He's just been absolutely brilliant, and he's always been, like Tim would say, there or thereabouts with these classics. So I really think that he's got a really good shot at Flanders this year. The other one is not Fabian Cancellara, it is Tom Boonen, because I think you can't ever really count Tom Boonen out of Flanders if he starts it, because Flanders and Roubaix, these are the races that he just absolutely has his heart set on, and I think that whatever setback he's had because of his elbow, I think his sheer passion for the whole thing will help compensate for that. So I'm going to say Sylvain Chavanel and Tom Boonen.
So this is really interesting. You guys have picked two people on the same team. So we got two quick steppers and we've got two BMCers, and I have split my pick between BMC and quick step. So what I think I'm going to do, just based on the litany of statistics that Tim threw out, I think I'm going to pick Sylvain Chavanel and Greg van Avermaet.
So just because I'm not anally retentive, I don't get my pick.
Well, no, you got your pick, right? You picked Sylvain Chavanel.
Well, you know what I mean. Oh, just wait, I get the next ones. Ha!
It's just, you know what? I just don't think Boonen is going to have it this year, so I had to go with the numbers.
Yeah.
GVA it is. Okay, so here's who we have on our team so far. We've got Peter Sagan, Matthew Goss, Sylvain Chavanel, and Greg van Avermaet. And that brings us to the queen of the classics, done by the queen of VeloVoices, Kitty Fondue.
I don't know if Cherie would like to. Right, Paris-Roubaix. Basically, it's a hard race for hard men. You've got to have just guts and ride balls to the wall to win this race. And you have to have some good luck because you go over 27 cobbled sectors, including the iconic Forest of Ehrenberg. And I mean, it's just brutal. If you have a mechanical at the wrong time, you lose it. Like George Hincapie can tell anybody. So this is really my favorite race of the year, and it's epic, and anybody who wins it deserves it. So my two personal selections are Geraint.
Dun dun dun.
My first one is Geraint Thomas.
Wow. All right.
And this is unbelievable that I actually actively picked a Sky Rider. However, I really do like Geraint Thomas, and I think that he's, I think that he could be a brilliant classics rider. And I think that, he could be one of these people that is allowed to go away and then just hammer it and win. He would need a lot of luck to win, I think, more so than some of the others. But that's my first rider.
Okay.
My second selection is, of course, Fabian Cancellara, because, and I'm going to go with my heart again on this one, he might not have the team around him, but he's proved that he can win Paris-Roubaix by himself. He knows this race inside and out, and I just think that if he just has a little bit of luck and he's on really good form, he's just going to storm it. That's it.
All right. Well, interesting. So I actually had 3 names written down for Paris-Roubaix.
But you can only have 2.
Correct. And one of them was Geraint Thomas.
Oh, Chris.
We
agree.
We agree. And I don't know if Geraint Thomas is viewed by his team as a domestique, because when you put Bosenhagen in there, which one of those 2 guys is your classics go-to guy? I don't know. But
I don't think it's Bosenhagen.
He's shown this year, Geraint Thomas anyway, or at least at the Tour Down Under, that his form was looking pretty good. So I did pick Geraint Thomas, but I also picked Tom Boonen. And he's one like Fabian Cancellara that knows how to win this race. He's won it a gazillion times. It is the race he's most expected to win, even more than Flanders. And it's when his late-breaking form will actually come to be, and he'll be ready to race it. And he's just going to ride away like he did last year. So those are my 2, Geraint Thomas and Tom Boonen. Tim.
Right. I'll gloss over the first one quickly because I think Kathy has said everything that needs to be said about Fabian Cancellara. But I do agree 100% with what you said, Kathy. I think if there is any race at which Fabian can make one of his trademark attacks stick, it will be at Roubaix. So despite all the tactical issues that he's had over the last year or so, he is absolutely the first name on my list for Roubaix. Second one, now this was a toss-up between 2. In the end, I've opted not to select Taylor Phinney, who is a 2-time winner of the Under-23 Paris-Roubaix race. And instead I've gone for experience. So my second choice is Juan Antonio Fletcher, who we've talked about already. And he is very much a Roubaix specialist. He can compete at Flanders too. He's been 3rd there in the past, but he is very much a Roubaix specialist. And I think he's due a little bit of luck. He has been amazingly consistent in this race. He says, trotting out the stats again. He's finished in the top 10 7 of the last 8 years. He's been 2nd. He's been 3rd twice. He's been 4th twice as well. This is the one race that he wants more than anything else, and I would dearly love him to win this year. Whether he will or not, I don't know, but he gets my vote as my second Roubaix rider.
All right, Kathy, you got a decision to make. Now, let me just say a couple things before you make your decision.
Oh, God.
If you go with Geraint Thomas and Fabian Cancellara, which would be logical because I picked Thomas and you and Tim picked Cancellara.
And I know what you're going to say.
then that means
But I
that
know what
we,
you're
as a
gonna
team,
say.
think that Tom Bonin will not win one of these three classics.
Which is why this is not the decision I would be making, Chris.
All right. So what is the decision that you will be making?
My decision is just that. There is absolutely no way we could have any kind of credible classics team without both Fabian Cancellara and Tom Boonen. No matter what, they are always going to figure in this race big time. So I think even though you and I both have Geraint Thomas, there's absolutely no way we can not have Tom Boonen on this. So it's Fabs and Boonen.
All right.
I can live with that.
All right. So we've got here's our six guys that we think can win these three races. Peter Sagan, Matthew Goss, Sylvain Chavanel, Greg van Avermaet, Fabian Cancellara, and Tom Bonin. Now, obviously, none of these teams win, actually, I would say none of these guys win races by themselves, but that would be a lie. Yeah. But, there's a lot of work done by domestiques, and occasionally domestiques even win the race. So what I've done for my domestique selections is, these are the qualities that I'm looking for in a domestique. Someone who knows when the race is changing and can direct the troops. So, someone who's won the race in the past, whether it be the junior race or the elite men's race. And someone who's actually capable of winning it themselves when they get the opportunity to get into the breakaway, like Johan van Summeren or Stewie O'Grady or any of these other people who've won it in the past because they've been the right guy at the right time in the right place. So I have picked as my, and you're going to laugh that I'm calling him a domestique, and he would probably laugh that I'm calling him a domestique, but I think Taylor Phinney is actually a domestique going into at least Flanders, and definitely, at Roubaix, Thor Hushoff wants to win that race. That's, you talk about Flesha wanting to win it, Tim. If Thor Hushoff could win any race in the world, Paris-Roubaix, right? He's their man at Roubaix. So Taylor Phinney, for me, is got to be one of these domestiques. And then if we're calling Geraint Thomas the leader at Sky in these races, then I have to say that Bosenhagen is my other domestique, because I think he is very capable of winning both Milan-San Remo and Paris-Roubaix. All right, Tim, what do you think?
Right, let's see. I found this really difficult to make. Really difficult decision to make. I certainly thought about Phinney, considered Bosenhagen, but I guess I've gone at it from a slightly different angle. So again, a selection very much with the heart as well as with the head. My first domestique would be Jens Vogt, just because, well, he's Jens. And I don't really think I need to throw any statistics at that one. And then the second one is that's a really tough choice. I gave a lot of consideration to Orica Green Edge's Svein Tuft, who's not that well known, but this guy can ride at the front of a peloton forever. He made a real impression on me at Tirreno-Adriatico last year, where he basically single-handedly pulled the peloton after him for 200 kilometres. And Mark Cavendish, who won the stage that day, he tweeted about it later, and he called it the ride of the millennium. So that gave me a really good reason to go for it. But in the end, I've had to opt for the ladies' favourite, Bernie Eisel. I'd include him because he can act as the road captain. He would make great decisions. He would marshal the troops. He'd also be a pretty decent plan B too. He's he's often thought of as being Cav's minder, but he's won Gent-Wevelgem in the past, and he's done pretty well at Roubaix. I think he's had a top 10. So he would be an interesting option, and of course he would be aesthetically pleasing.
I guess Kathy would agree with that. So are you going with Tuft and Eisel then as your two domestiques?
I think I will go with I'll go with Jens and with Eisel.
Okay, so Vogt and Eisel. Okay, Miss Fondue, we leave the last two domestique selections to you.
Well, I'm actually going to agree with you, Chris, and with you, Tim, because I'm going to pick, of course, Bernie Eisel. not only is he the ladies' favorite and very pleasing on the eye, and if I have to watch a Sky Train, he'd better be on the front of it. But also because he can just lead, which I love. And then the other one is one of yours, Chris, which is Taylor Phinney, because he has won Roubaix twice in the under 23s or 21s, can't remember which. And he would be, you know what? He would just ride his heart out for his team, whether it be Fabs and Boonen or whatever. So I've picked him.
All right. So I'm just gonna split the difference there then and go with Taylor Phinney and Bernie Eisel as the two quote domestiques. So here is our team. We've got Peter Sagan, Matthew Goss, Sylvain Chavanel, Greg Van Avermaet, Fabian Cancellara, Tom Bonin, Taylor Phinney, and Bernie Eisel. Now, my prediction is that none of them will win. And Philippe Gilbert and Thor Hushoff will win it all.
Okay.
No, we'll see what happens. I think that's a pretty solid team. All right. Well, that was fun. And there wasn't actually that much disagreement, which kind of surprises me.
Yeah.
All right, Tim, tell us what's happening in the next couple of weeks, because we got a lot of great racing coming up.
Oh yeah, just a quick rattle through then what's coming up over the next fortnight. We've talked a little bit about some of the races already, in particular Milan-San Remo, which is coming up next Sunday, so that's the 17th of March. It's been won by Australian riders the last 2 years, so Matt Goss in 2011 and Simon Gerrans last year. It's not quite the sprinter-dominated race it used to be, but it's certainly the one they all want. And then the following week we've got a couple of big stage races. There's one World Tour race, the week-long Volta a Catalunya, which last year was won by Orica Green Edge's Michael Alborsini, who's also been a stage winner at Paris-Nice this week, and he held off several of the big-name climbers to win that. And then there's the 2-day, 3-stage Criterium International, which was won last year by Cadel Evans.
I call that one the Tour of Jens Vogt.
Yeah,
absolutely.
He's won it so many times. Yeah, that's a great race.
And it's being held as usual on Corsica, which is particularly relevant this year because it will host the start of the 100th Tour de France in the summer. So it'll be a nice little taster before we return to the island in July.
Yeah, and then we have the start of the Flanders Classics.
Oh yeah. Pretty much the most fans' favourite week of the year, I guess.
Yeah.
So we kick off with Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen on the Wednesday, which is the 20th of March, and then on the Friday we have E3 and Sunday Gent-Wevelgem. So last year these three races were swept by Omega Pharma Quickstep. Mm-hmm. So Nicky Terpstra won Dwarsdorf-Vlaanderen
and a solo breakaway.
A fantastic ride, and some guy named Boonen won the other two.
All right, well, we have some great racing to look forward to, and I can't wait to check our list and see, how we do with regards to how many of these people we've chosen are going to win these races. The thing about cycling is that you can't predict; it's so unpredictable, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. All right, now we are going to go for our sprint finish. And we got 4 questions here from people who follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. And again, fans, we thank you so much for interacting with us and submitting these questions. So, Tim, I'm going to go at you first. The first one is from Irvin Smith, who put on Facebook, what are your thoughts on Cav harshly calling out his lead-out train on one day and then meekly calling out himself on the next day?
Well, it's a Cav question, isn't it? So obviously I had to answer it. I think Cav, he's normally incredibly supportive of his team. So it was certainly surprising that he criticised them after losing out on stage 2 of Tirreno-Adriatico. Having said that, having watched the stage, I think OPQS did get it wrong. They burnt too many matches too early on in a very long stage in abominable conditions. And as a result, they got fairly soundly dominated in the last 10 kilometres. And I think that the thing you also have to remember that this wasn't the first time that the team hasn't quite functioned in the right way. So Cav left both the Tour of the Algarve and 3 days of West Flanders winless, and there's obviously something that's not quite working at the moment. But having said that, the next day he took it on himself for not winning. His fault, his responsibility. So I don't really agree with the thought that he was harsh one day and weak the next. For me, that's just his style of leadership. You put a rocket under the team when it's called for, but you're also willing to shoulder the blame too. I don't think there's any question. We all know how vocal he is, and he's also a very, very smart racer, not just some robot who does whatever his DS tells him to and toes the party line in terms of PR. So, do you know what? I'd rather he spoke up than stayed quiet.
All right. Well, why don't you ask the next question then, Tim?
Right, yeah, so I think this one's for you, Chris.
All
so
right.
It's from Midge Tremaine, otherwise known as @ParisWheels on Twitter. And his question is, can Jakob Fuglsang be a top 10 GC contender?
Ooh, I think no. So Paris-Nice was supposed to be Jakob Fuglsang's coming out party, right? This is the race that he was prepping for, and he left, I think, after day 2 or 3 with stomach problems. But the problem with Fuglsang is he's like the third best GC rider on his team. And then when you throw that in with all the other GC riders like the Contadors, the Froomes, the Rodriguez's, the Hajidals, the Tolanskis. I mean, I can name 10 guys that I think would podium in a GC race before Jakob Fuglsang. So, Jakob, prove me wrong. That's my answer. All right. I guess I get to ask the next. It's also from Midge. And this one's to you, Kathy. What is the ideal team for Fabian Cancellara?
Well, I've thought long and hard about this, and I have decided that the best team, or the ideal team for Fabian Cancellara, would be Team Fondue. Because when God throws that suitcase full of cash down on me, I am going to free Fabs from his indentured servitude to Radio Shack, and I'm going to make my own team, and it's going to be Team Fondue, and I'm going to buy him some support.
All right. That's a brilliant answer. Okay, of those 3 answers, Kathy, you by far win the sprint finish. So, all right, we had one other question, and it was from Jimmy Retweet at Jimmy _Velodrome, which was, how many faces does Thomas Voeckler have? #Grimface. And the answer to that question is, you will never see the end of Thomas Voeckler's faces. And they were all brilliant. So nobody exudes more panache than Thomas Voeckler. All right, well, that brings us to the end. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at VeloVoices. You can also, of course, read all of our great blog entries at VeloVoices.com, and you can follow us on Facebook at Facebook/VeloVoices. Thank you for joining us. Tim and Kitty, have a great night in London, and good night from Virginia.
Good night.
Good night.
VeloVoices. Many voices, one passion. Pro cycling for fans by fans.